Well, if you go back to the Torah, the 5 books of Moses at the beginning of the Hebrew Bible, there are, by tradition, 613 commandments in the Torah. Some of them are about sacrifices, which we don't do anymore. But Moses says that God requires that you do all kinds of things. You treat other people well, be honest in your business, and so on and so forth, as well as observing holidays and offering the sacrifices and so on. So first there's this stress on the commandments because that's the history and that's the root. But we've also, over the ages, had an evolution where, Torah isn't a once and for all document. Here it is, you do this and you're set. Because in fact, there are things that the Torah requires, like the sacrifices, that we can't do anymore. And there are things that fit for biblical society that even in biblical history and certainly subsequently evolved and changed. They had polygamy. We don't allow that anymore, right? So, they said you can't charge interest on a loan, all right? We can't have a modern economy without doing that. So those things start as commandments, but what Rabbinic Judaism did post-biblically, the last 2,000 years, is come up with a way to try to update that and adapt it very slowly but surely as times change. An orthodox, which is to say classic rabbinic spirituality, there's this constant sense that I think that the adherent has, that he or she is doing precisely what God wants, because here's a list, right? And you can check off, I ate breakfast right, and I did my business right this morning, and, I remembered to call my wife or husband, right? They know that they're loved, and so on and so forth. So there's this spirituality of doing the commandments and thus serving God, right? That body of commandments grew and grew and grew over the centuries. And in modernity, you got a rebellion, first as a mystical rebellion in the 18th century within Orthodoxy, and then as a more rational rebellion in the 19th century, which is Reform Judaism. You've got the Hasidim in the 18th century. But in Reform Judaism, which is the dominant group in America for your students to know about, said, it has become so full of and encrusted with laws and laws on laws and so on, that we need to, trim some of that away to appreciate, the aesthetics of it and to stress the ethics. So what 19th century Reform Judaism did first in Europe, and then it was imported to America, was say that the ritual laws are there to remind you, to help you relate to God and to remind you of the ethical ideals. But the real point is, the most important point is the ethics. So, a more modern Western Reform spirituality, right, would say that in nature, in art, in all the ways in which one senses beauty in the world, beauty, truth, love, justice, the mathematical perfection of the universe, all of these things that fill us with awe, right? We get a sense of spirituality, which doesn't mean you don't do any ritual, because I like to say ritual is the flesh on the bare bones of theology. Nobody lives in their head all the time. Right. But with our holidays, with dietary things, fasting on Yom Kippur, or not eating bread on Passover to remind us of slavery and the Exodus and so on and so forth. One eats and smells and tastes and sings and dances one's identity, right? So it all works in giving a person a sense of ongoing acting out of one's identity that ought to make you a better person to mix with everyone, but certainly gives satisfaction within the family and the Jewish community.